Huh? Jacob couldn't keep up with her thoughts. Sophie, who was holding the wooden badges, suddenly got excited.
Fifth Heaven. Last time when we visited the Nine Dragon Palace, didn't we go up there?
Because of the Nine Dragon Palace incident, she got to know more about Fifth Heaven. Now, since Jacob has reached the 3rd level, his cultivation progress was equal to a human cultivator's core formation realm. Also, with the 2 identity badges they got, it wasn't hard to understand why she came up with this new idea. On Fifth Heaven, there were floating spirit mountains and sects. Compared to the Wildcat Mountain that they visited last time, it was way more entertaining. Go to Fifth Heaven. Sophie's suggestion also tempted Jacob. He didn't know that the 2 men he captured today came from Fifth Heaven and were investigating the city. Moreover, he didn't observe the attribute of their cultivation techniques. Of course, if they had reached 3rd level as well, Jacob might not be able to find out which elemental techniques they cultivated. As Jacob was indecisive, Sophie couldn't help but reach her arm across the table and pull on his sleeve.
Let's go up there and have some fun.
Jacob thought about it for a moment. If we are going up there, we have to ask your mom.
What? No.
Sophie disagreed.
If we ask her, she will definitely disagree.
The fact was that Jacob wanted to go to Fifth Heaven as well. The last time when he went to the Nine Dragon Palace, he only got to spend a few moments on Fifth Heaven and only saw the general environment. Later, when he was accompanied by the twins and went to the trading convention on Fifth Heaven, he couldn't get a clear view since it was nighttime. Then, how are we getting up there? Jacob was convinced and asked her with a soft tone.
Doesn't my mom have that painting? She normally doesn't use it at all, so I can get it and we would be able to use it.
Sophie lowered her voice and said. Since she started cultivating again, she was getting braver by the second. That's not a good plan. Jacob shook his head and refused. What about this? I will summon Snowflake and let it take us up there. If it works, great. If it doesn't, then we will forget about it. Sophie stared at Jacob and thought about it for a few seconds.
All right, let's try it.
When are we going up there, then? Jacob asked.
What are we waiting for? Now, of course.
Sophie stared at Jacob, with mischievous excitement shining in her eyes. It was Monday the next day, so it wouldn't be easy for her to sneak out of school since she had classes during the day. If they went during the night, not only would it be dangerous, but Fifth Heaven would also be covered in darkness. If they couldn't see anything, what was the point of them going there anyway? On the other hand, since they had a few hours during lunch, they could sneak to Fifth Heaven without being noticed by Helen. Sophie's plot was well planned. Sophie could not wait to go there, and Jacob also wanted to visit Fifth Heaven. So, he took his phone out and called Kathy, who was at home. Hello? Kathy? Jacob said as the call was answered. Kathy, is Snowflake next to you? Oh, it's stealing sausage from the fridge? Can you ask Noah to bring Snowflake to the city and find me? Nothing. I just had some work. Jacob hung up the phone quickly, but Sophie was still staring at him. Snowflake was staying at home. That's why I had to call Kathy and ask her, Jacob explained. Now, Snowflake had more freedom than before. Since it started relying on Noah, it acted more like his follower instead of Jacob's spirit beast. Not long after Jacob put his phone away, Noah and Snowflake landed heavily on the ground outside the window. A small pit appeared on the road as Snowflake shattered the road with its paws a little. Jacob and Sophie were both shocked, as they did not expect Snowflake to arrive so soon. This stupid kid doesn't even know how to restrain himself in the mortal world, Jacob thought to himself. Fortunately, the restaurant was in a quiet location, and no one saw Noah and Snowflake's rough landing. Those who worked at the restaurant thought the loud banging noise came from the construction site nearby. Through the window, Noah waved at Jacob. Jacob quickly pulled Sophie out of the restaurant as he was worried that Noah was going to cause trouble. These two beasts couldn't do anything well when they were together. "Why did you ask Snowflake to come here?" Noah raised his head to look at Jacob and asked.
"We are going to Fifth Heaven. Do you want to come with us?"
Sophie asked immediately. Sophie had met Noah a few times before and knew about his affluent background. Even her parents had to pay him respect. Therefore, she decided to ask him to join the group. "Fifth Heaven? What's so good about that place? If you want to go to Ninth Heaven instead," Noah said arrogantly.
"Stop bluffing. You aren't even brave enough to go to Fifth Heaven,"
Sophie said. "Who said I'm not brave enough?" Noah got mad. "I have been to Fifth Heaven more than 20 times already." Although Noah was considered a super demon beast, according to his years of cultivation, it hasn't been long since he successfully transformed into the human force. Therefore, he didn't know much about the ways of the world since he had always been with his master. All Sophie had to do to trick him was to call him a coward.
"All right then, we will go to Fifth Heaven and see if you really are familiar with the place,"
Sophie said. "How can I not be familiar with that place?" Noah pulled out his black disc-like flight treasure from his pocket. "Put up an energy sphere," Jacob reminded Noah while he had formed his own. He grabbed Sophie's arm and sat on Snowflake's back. Noah flew straight up into the sky and left behind a black trail. "Snowflake, follow him," Jacob tapped on Snowflake's head. Snowflake's paws were lit up with colorful lights. With the protection of the red energy sphere, they started flying toward Noah. Jacob thought that all they had to do was fly upward and they would enter Fifth Heaven. However, he was not familiar with the environment of Fifth Heaven. Now, he was less worried since Noah was there to lead the way. Noah had the mind of a typical child. Therefore, he was easy to get along with as long as he wasn't angered. On the other hand, Sophie, who was sitting in front of Jacob, did not know that Snowflake's speed got so fast. As she looked down at the city that was disappearing below the clouds, she couldn't help but get a little scared. She slightly leaned backward as her shoulders touched Jacob's chest and her head was under his jaw. Jacob understood her fear, so he wrapped his arms around her waist and held her hands, using his arms to hold her body still. If she fell from this height, which was about several thousand meters above the air, there was no way that Sophie could survive. She was still in the Chi refinement realm. Sophie's heart was beating fast. Even though she was terrified of the fast speed, she didn't want to show her fear. All she could do was try to pull through. Right at this moment, Jacob reached out and she held onto his hands without any hesitation. The feeling was like standing on the wings of a plane that was flying at a high altitude. Not to mention that Snowflake's back wasn't as spacious as the wings of an aircraft. Even a master would be terrified, let alone Sophie, who was just starting her cultivation journey again. However, when Jacob was holding her tightly, a sense of security appeared in her mind. Snowflake's speed was way faster than the speed of an aircraft. Sophie's back was pressed firmly against Jacob's chest, and her hands were holding his tightly. "Snowflake, stop for a moment." Jacob rubbed its ears with his fingers. Snowflake, who just received the order, suddenly stopped and hovered in midair. The sudden stop almost threw Jacob and Sophie off its back. Noting that they were 10,000 meters above the ground, Jacob, who clenched onto Snowflake with his legs hurriedly, was covered in a cold sweat due to fear. Since Jacob had wrapped his arms around Sophie's belly, she wasn't thrown off of Snowflake either. While they were hovering in midair, Sophie sighed and was too afraid to look down. In fact, even if she looked down, all she could see were layers of thick clouds. This altitude was much higher compared to the altitude she was at when she was summoning the rainfalls. If measured carefully, they were at the height of third or fourth heaven already. Sophie closed her eyes slightly while her eyelashes twitched. She didn't want to go back on her word, since going to Fifth Heaven was her idea. However, she couldn't control her body, as it was shivering slightly. Jacob grabbed her shoulders softly and picked her up before turning her around.
Hey, what are you...
Sophie tried to ask, but her tone was soft. It's better when you are facing this way. Jacob put her back on Snowflake and made her face toward himself before he gently held her shoulders. Let's go, Snowflake. Jacob patted its head. Snowflake continued to fly upward. Today, Snowflake was equivalent to 4 top-tier flight treasures that were reinforcing each other. If it weren't carrying Jacob and Sophie, it could fly past Noah in an instant. As Snowflake started to accelerate, Sophie couldn't help but throw herself into Jacob's arm, hugging his waist tightly with her arms. This was the first time that Sophie was showing her vulnerable and scared side to Jacob.